Mark Skaar on the Skaar Kaard on 103.7 The Fox. I'm proud to welcome back Warner Hodges from the Warner E. Hodges Band. Warner, how are you?
I'm good.
And we want to talk about your new Soul Shaker album. I love it. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a good record, I think.
Tell me about how the record was made, because I know, like, your band is all over the world, literally, but you did the record here in the United States with Joe Blanton, I think, and some other guys.
Yeah. Well, I lucked up. Every year I do the Outlaw Country Cruise, and after Outlaw Country Cruise 7, we came to Nashville and recorded, as opposed to the boys all go. I always fly the boys in for the Outlaw Country Cruise. So, when we docked after the cruise, we were in Miami already. So I just had to get them to Nashville. So I flew the boys up here when I come home, and we set up to cut at Joe's. And we've cut 2 records during COVID, but we cut literally doing the sharing files all over the world because nobody could move. And I knew that I wanted to try to get the band all in the same room and see what we could do. And it was a wonderful thing to be able to cut that way. I think the record come out better for it.
I wanted to talk about, we talked about Joe Blanton. I've had Joe on the show before, and he's really kind of your right-hand guy here. Tell me about his importance to you, and because I know you guys go back a real long way, and his importance to you and the project.
Joe and I go back literally to high school. I met Joe, it would have been late 70s. Kind of met him and Jeff Johnson from the Scorchers roughly the same time. We've been pals forever. He literally moved to L.A. when I was living in New York City, and I moved to L.A. in 1990 and ended up living less than 5 blocks from where he lived in L.A. We've just been buddies forever, and the last, I don't know, I guess we're probably pushing 15, 18 years, we've just done a lot of stuff musically together. Joe owns a studio, and he's an amazing writer, done a lot of stuff together, and he's worked on a lot of my solo stuff, or Jason and the Scorchers stuff, or Dan Baird and Homemade Sin stuff. I think him and Dan and Stan Lynch from Tom Petty's band have a band together called the Chefs.
Correct.
They don't play live, but they record records. And, Joe's just an amazingly talented dude, and I've known him, like I say, since the 70s.
Talking with Warner Hodges about the new album Soul Shaker, and of course I alluded to the fact that you guys are all over the world, literally. How did you put this band together? I know you've got Ben Marsden. Let's talk about Ben.
When Dan Baird started talking about retiring quite a few years back before he retired, I knew I needed to start thinking about putting together. I knew one day he was going to walk into a sound check and go, all right, boys, that's it. And that's exactly what happened, but it was 5 years later. And I threw together a band of British guys, and through the years I was able to augment the band, and the band got better and better. And I had a guy named Michael Fassberg playing guitar for me. That Michael actually passed away from a brain tumor, and very, very sad. It was the classic, literally went to the doctor with a severe headache, and they sent him home, and 8 days later he was gone. But I'm real good friends with Ginger Wildheart, and there's a lot of musicians that are on the periphery of the Wildheart thing over in Britain. And I talked to Ginger's guitar tech and told him I needed a guitar player, and he said, I think I've got the guy for you. And Ben auditioned for us, and he's a spectacular guitar player. I mean, he's an amazing guitar player. He kind of brought the thing that I didn't have in my band. I mean, I didn't need somebody to do another version of Warner. I needed somebody to bring a different flavor of ice cream to the band, and he's done just that. There's nothing I can throw at Ben that he can't play, which is pretty impressive.
Let's talk about Jason Knight, your bass player.
Jason has been there literally from the get-go. His wife, Trudy Knight, was the photographer for Homemade Sin, does a lot of other stuff, but literally every cool shot of Homemade Sin the last 15 years that got taken was Trudy's. And when I started putting the band together, I found out her husband played bass, and we brought him on board, and he's been in the bass slot from day one. Jason's a pretty talented guy.
And then a new drummer, Shane Dixon.
Yeah, Shane came in. John Powney, our old drummer, had to leave the band. he had family commitments. He was gone a little bit too much. And, he's got young kids, an elderly mother, and all the stuff that got in the way of him being able to tour. And so John had to leave the band, and we were fortunate enough to find this guy, Shane Dixon, once again, kind of on the peripheral of the Wild Hearts. Shane played in one of Ginger Wildheart's other bands called Ginger and the Sinners. Shane was the drummer in that, and he's really a pretty massive drummer. He's really good and a great background singer.
Talking Warner Hodges, and if you don't mind, I'd like to go track by track on Soul Shaker and start with...
Do it.
All right, tell me about that rock and roll.
Joe and I did there's a band here called the Long Players that do albums by artists where they literally bring in guest singers and they reproduce the record from side one to side two. And we had done some Stone stuff. We had been listening to When the Whip Comes Down was one of the songs that Joe sang. And we were talking about that at the time, and it was like, man, we need a song like something like that for my record. And next thing I knew, Joe was like, here's what we need. It's like out of phase Strat sound that Ronnie Wood did on When the Whip Comes Down. It was all when that song kind of appeared as an homage to the Stones. Just 3-chord rock and roll song, not life-changing. It won't cure the cancer. We weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. It was just a 3-chord rock and roll song that very heavily influenced by the Rolling Stones.
No end in sight.
That one was a guitar riff that I had, and we were able to develop it into a tune. It was just a guitar riff. It started out as that, which a lot of my songs do, start out as just a guitar riff. I'll forever hear Dan Baird in my head going, dude, they're not going to leave humming your guitar riffs. Where's your chorus? But we kind of got the Thin Lizzy twin guitar thing going in it, and there's a lot more going on in the song. It's not just a 3-chord rock and roll song, but a little bit more player heavy, if that makes any sense.
Sure does. Red Devil Road.
Red Devil Road is just my 3-chord boogie, southern boogie, man, what I was raised on. I love that kind of stuff. A little bit of a tip of the hat to Dan Baird, the Georgia Satellites, but and Ben Berry, Jason and the Scorcher-esque, too. So I had kind of stayed away from doing things like that because the Scorchers were still a functioning unit, but we've kind of disbanded the band, and now anything that I write that I would have put in the Jason and the Scorchers pile goes into my pile now. So that's what Red Devil Road is, just 3 chords and a cloud of dust.
Talking to Warner Hodges about Soul Shaker, let's go to Great Unknown.
That actually, I was getting together for a writing session with Joe. Once again, I always hear Dan Baird, never show up without an idea. At least come in with some type of idea. You don't want everybody sitting there looking at each other going, well, what are we going to do now? And I literally wrote that. I happened to be down in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I kind of come up with, I wanted something that was a little bit more, what's the word? Not Americana, but I wanted something kind of sing-songy. It was also right after I had decided to leave Jason and the Scorchers. And I was driving from Murfreesboro, Tennessee to Nashville, and I literally wrote the thing driving down the road. I didn't have any paper. I stopped in Joe's driveway and didn't go in while I typed it into my phone because I didn't want to lose it. And, when I finally went inside Joe's house, he's like, hell, man, what the hell you been doing in my driveway? And type out this song. And when I showed it to him, it wasn't finished by any means, but it was a good skeleton. And he just kind of looked at me and smiled and said, wow, you've hooked a big fish. Let's see what we can do.
Hear Me Out is next.
Another guitar riff. And the lyric, that's really Joe. But he let me kind of head down the road of probably one of my best singing performances on the record. He really let me have some fun with it when we were singing it. And it was surprisingly cool, the things. I don't think of myself as a singer. I think of myself as a guitar player first. And it was fun to actually go about the vocal the way I go about guitars. I was able to really try to expand the vocal and take it other places that not make it quite so rote, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed singing that song. Difficult song to sing nightly, but that's okay.
Dan Baird gets a name check on that song, too.
Absolutely. Dan might have been in the room. If Dan Baird's in the room, it's going to be better.
I'm a Lover, Not a Fighter, which is a cover song, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we went about it. I think there's an Edmonds cover of it, and there's a Kinks cover of it. The whole idea with that was that we could really take it over into the country rock, chicken picking thing. And it was, fun 3-chord song, and serious guitar breaks in it. Ben and I can both kind of do sword fighting in it, which is good, guitar sword fighting. And that's it. It really wasn't a super thought-out thing. It was just let's utilize some of the strengths we have in the band.
Talking to Warner Hodges, and the next song is Shine.
Shine, there you go. We had a 3-day off period in Germany in, I guess it would have been 22. Ben and I got together and wrote songs, tried to come up with ideas. The beginning of Great Unknown musically happened there. I didn't have any lyrics for it, but the beginning of Great Unknown started there. Shine really started there. Ben played this banjo riff, the opening riff. It's basically a banjo riff. He's playing on a guitar. And, I was like, whoa, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's just an exercise. And it's like, no, dude, that's a song. Play it again. The story, basically it became Smokey and the Bandit in my head. It's just like I saw dude Jerry Reed driving a semi load of moonshine through the American South is basically what that song was.
Next up is Plain Mean.
Plain Mean is just Creedence Clearwater, man. John Fogerty. I'm really influenced by that kind of music. I wanted that kind of a vibe, a kind of Fogerty. I always, when I say swamp with Fogerty, because he's from Oregon or something. He ain't from anywhere near a swamp. But that swampy groove. And also, it needs to be said on the record, this was after John Powney, our drummer, had left the band, but before Shane Dixon was in the band. Brad Pemberton is the guy that played drums on the tracks. And Brad really plays that groove like there's no tomorrow. Brad had a lot to do with that song, actually, in my head.
Next is a Joe Blanton song called I Feel Strange.
Country song. We needed a country song. I like putting a country song on the record. I had really nothing to do with it. Joe played it for me. It's like, oh, let me have that one. Just a great song. I mean, Joe, if the muse hits him, he'll stop in the middle of what he's doing and write a song. And that's exactly what happened with I Feel Strange. I showed up one afternoon, and he played it for me and went, here's your country song. I was like, all right, cool.
And then the album wraps with Thanks for the Ride.
Thanks for the Ride was actually written for a never-recorded Jason and the Scorchers record. Joe, myself, and I don't know if it's Joe and I, or I don't know if Dan was involved in that one or not. But it was written for a Scorcher record that never happened. And when we were trying to piece this record together, Joe just out of nowhere played the demo. I had completely forgot about it. We had a fully developed demo of the song. Joe was singing. I had played a lot of slide guitar. Dan played bass. I think Brad Pemberton played on the demo. But it was a really good demo. I mean, it had been recorded well and mixed well and all that. And when Joe played it for me, it's like, oh, hell, I completely forgot about that song. And so, added it to the record. It's my song, so our song. And it's a good ender, good song to end the record with.
Warner, thank you for the conversation. As always, I appreciate it so much.
Oh, Mark, thank you, man. Thank you for all the help. I appreciate doing it.
That's Warner.
You.
Well, thank you very much. That's Warner Hodges. I'm Mark Skaar, and this is a Skaar Card on 103.7 The Fox.